Hello, Annmarie. It is great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good, Susanne. How are you? It's so good to be doing this. It's very exciting to start off this conversation with you.
It is. I feel exactly the same because we are here to talk about cultivating an above the line mentality. And we've been talking about this for a while. Because what we'll do is we will discuss what it means to be above the line. I mean, it may be a concept that many people are not familiar with. So we will lay out why it's important to leaders of all levels to work with this concept. And we, of course, going to give them a specific tool. But I really want to introduce you first because I think people should know who we are.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could give us a little insight into yourself, or perhaps first I'll tell people how we got to meet because we only got talking earlier this year. You were very kind to, I think you reviewed my book, How to Do the Inner Work.
Yep.
And it turned out that you had already read my previous book, The Power of Project Leadership. And then we got talking and we found out that we have many common interests in leadership, change management. We've both been project managers and we share this passion for personal, professional development and mindsets. And we even worked for the same organization like 20 years ago. And I don't know, should we tell people which organization that was?
That was JP Morgan.
Hey,
Yeah,
I
there
think
you
you were in New York and I was in
go.
London. So we actually didn't meet at the time, but it was a funny coincidence. So why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, that's it's so good because I think there's all these synchronicities of how we were sort of aligned to just come together and have these conversations at this time. And I think these conversations are so important right now in the world. And so I'm excited to do this with you. But who am I? Well, I'm a person who cares deeply about elevating other people and empowering other people and helping them see and step into their own inner power. And that's something I'm just really, really passionate about. From a business perspective, my background is IT. I sort of started with a computer science degree, started building trading systems, worked for about 10 years on Wall Street, managing global teams and businesses. Then I moved to Vermont, started my own management consulting business. And we've been in business for about 14 years, helping clients move through really large transformative projects. So changing their business through technology. And also as part of that, growing and cultivating leadership and teams within organizations and really empowering leaders to help themselves set up an environment where they can be successful and their teams can be successful. So that's sort of what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I'm really excited to have these conversations because this is all about empowering and self-directed leadership.
Yeah, well, I love that introduction. And what stuck with me was elevating other people, because
Yeah,
that's so true, isn't it? And that's why we're here to discuss this topic.
yeah, so important.
Yeah, and just a bit of background about myself. Like you, I have a background running teams, running projects. I actually qualified as a coach back in 2009, so that's now a long time ago. And I've been focusing full time on coaching managers, change managers, project managers, executives since, well, I guess it's 11, 12 years ago now that I stepped away from managing projects full time. And this book, actually, The Power of Project Leadership, has been carrying me through a big part of what I do now in my career. So I'm very proud to say that these days I spend most time running a leadership program for very senior project managers, partly based on the book. So it's that's definitely what gets me out of bed in the morning and elevating other people. I actually think I'm gonna steal that phrase from you because that is definitely what gets me out of bed as well. And so we decided to create this podcast series because we have a desire to, let me say it again, elevate other people and give back really, because I think we both experience that there are many people out there, change managers, project managers, leaders, and perhaps people who aspire to become leaders who struggle, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, maybe they have self-talk, maybe they're stressed, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they have any kind of self-doubt, or could be any kind of situation, right? Is that your experience as well, Annmarie?
So I was actually presenting at the PMI Global Summit in LA a couple of weeks ago, and my presentation topic was from stress to success, neuroscience leadership topics. And it really, people showed up in that room and they were, I took a poll about how people were feeling day to day, and over 70% of the people in that room indicated that they were feeling stressed daily or nearly daily. And it was something that was affecting them both in their work life and their home life. So I think this conversation about stress and overwhelm, and how busy our lives are, play into this conversation we're going to have today about how are we above the line or below the line, and we're going to talk about what that means. But I just think these types of conversations are so needed right now, because people tend to look at other people and think that they're all doing okay. And the research is showing, and the statistics around mental health is showing that, really a lot of people are not okay. And 4 in 5 people are feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed. And that stress from their work life is carrying in and affecting their relationships with family and friends. So I feel like these conversations, and helping to elevate people and empower people to shift how they're thinking about things and how they're feeling about things, and giving them the tools to be able to make that shift, is so important and so needed right now.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot going on, and we want to be able to give people those tools. I also have a lot of people coming to coaching sessions feeling overwhelmed. But we're doing a series in this podcast, and we will dive into various topics that help us to address these challenges that many of us face, for sure. So I think at this stage it's important to get in there and define what do we mean when we say above the line and below the line. And I would like people watching or listening to just imagine there's a line, and quite simply we can be either above the line or below the line. The way I would say it is that when we are above the line, we are in a state of innovation or creation or collaboration. This is where we want to spend most of our time. This is where we get results, because our mind is open, our heart is open, we are open to challenge. We can work with passion and compassion. So we're in a mindset where we can also empathize with others and be there for others. We're curious, engaging. I think all the buzzwords, right, are when we are above the line. We're feeling empowered, we're feeling confident. And there can be degrees of being above the line. I think if we are seriously above the line, if we imagine this ladder, we're probably in a state of flow or joy, and feeling inspired and able to inspire others. But I think for me, words like safety and confidence also belong to being above the line.
Right.
And so in briefly, this is what we focused on in this series. We want to help people get above the line. And let me also say in the same breath, what is then being below the line? There are many different experiences and expressions of being below the line, but again, in a nutshell, it is, instead of being open and expansive, it is a state of being contracted. So we're somehow closing in on ourselves. There's a kind of a state of stress or tension. And if we are just below the line, we might feel a bit frustrated or impatient. But if we are seriously below the line, we could feel really overwhelmed or really angry or stuck. So the behaviors we might see from somebody who's below the line, they could be reactive, defensive. I mean, we all know that, right? We even go into defense mode without realizing it sometimes. We can get withdrawn, overly emotional. And I think the whole idea why this is important to us is that when we are below the line, we're just not in the best place in our minds to make decisions, to collaborate. And I think I also want to say at this stage that when we go below the line, it could be several times during a day, could be several times during conversation. And you know what's interesting? I went to do a lecture at Westminster University here in London just 2 days ago on this topic. And I asked some of the students, so what brings you below the line normally? And how often does it happen? And how long do you spend there? And one of the people said, I've spent years below the line. So I think that's the extreme case, is that we get stuck in this kind of mindset. But I really want to hear your take on this, Annmarie. What do you think of all of this?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that you have said and how you've described above and below the line, and also the stages and the ladder of what it looks like above and below. I just want to call it what it is. I feel like below the line is a victim mindset, a victim mentality. And it's in when you're in that mode, life is happening to you, not for you. And what I mean by that is you're held victim to your circumstance and to your environment. And you're maybe the person in that place is feeling powerless to change things. And you're feeling like nothing that you do matters. You just got to show up every day and just keep your head above water. It's like, well, nobody ever listens to what I say anyway. Or, that sounds great, but it'll never work here. Those are victim mindset statements. And I know this and I can say this because I can see clearly that I was in a victim mindset for a long, long time. And while I might not have shown up that way, and people might have looked at me from the outside and maybe thought that wasn't the case because I was always, how can we do things? And looking out from a forward looking perspective, but really internally I was in a victim mindset. We worked, just to give a quick example, I worked, I was pretty successful in the teams I led when I was working in investment banking. Had a couple of small kids in New York, decided to moved to Vermont, found a job, but the job wasn't really where it needed to be, and I had to take like a third of my salary to be here. And so that increased stress around finances and stress around, well, what are the other opportunities here? And for a long time, I spent my time in this victim mindset and telling this story about how there's no opportunities and how there's limited opportunities and how it's so hard to live here. And, my husband ended up having to go back to New York and work out of state. So I was left raising three small kids during the week. And that compounded the stress, and it compounded my victim mentality about being sort of abandoned and being left here. And, it wasn't until like maybe I think it was in the 2016 timeframe where I started to I listened to a podcast from Hal Elrod, who has written the book The Miracle Morning. And it was really about how you can shift your mentality and shift your mindset. And that was one of the first podcasts that I listened to. And then I started diving into all of these books, Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and all of these different books about self-directed self accountability, living a self directed life, taking on accountability for your own actions. And that sort of put me on this path where I got into, performing better, and then meditation and changing my mindset, etc. And now looking back, I can see very clearly that that period of time, I was very much in a victim mindset. The stories I told about my youth, about how I got to where I was, all of that was very much life happened to me and I suffered because of it. And but now looking back, I'm so thankful for all of those experiences because I can see that life was happening for me. And I would never be where I am today, standing here, having this conversation with you, teaching people what I know about neuroscience strategies and resiliency techniques, and having put those into play in my own life to create ease and flow in my own life. I'd never be here without all of those stepping stones and all of those challenges that were presented to me. So I think that's the difference, right? It's the same life. It was just the framing of how I looked at it. Pre 2016, I was definitely looking at it from the woe is me, let me tell the story over and over so I can re-emphasize, maybe, and without even thinking about it, maybe getting attention, maybe making people feel sorry for me, right? Because I'm telling that story. I was very identified with that personality. And then, when I look back now, I'm like, well, no, that's not the true me. And I can see that all of these things that happened were happening for me, not to me. And I think that's the difference between the below the line and the above the line. I think even that I'm here in this place, there are periods where you still dip below the line, right? There are things that come up and you might be taken aback or you might react to them. But now the time spent there is so much shorter because now it's like, well, oh, hold on. I just recognized I just went below the line or I just reacted to that. Let me pause and just give myself some space to really think it through clearly and respond more appropriately and bring myself back up. And I think that's the difference of being able to shift. And we can all control where we fall and how we think. And when you're above the line, and I know we're going to talk about this through the series, you are much more energized, you are less fatigued, life is less draining for you, so you end up, you're healthier, you're able to help yourself, you're able to help other people, and it's life is just there, and it's unfolding set of experience for you, and you learn to grow with that, and it's such a better and more healthy place to be.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting in what you said as well there with your example is this story that we tell ourselves, right? And if we can become aware of that story, we can change our story, and feel empowered to take a different perspective and take different action. And I think that's the essence of most of the coaching that I do as well. Now, I just want to, for clarity, because when you say it's a victim mindset, it can sound really wrong or really bad, and people should feel ashamed of being below the line. But let's just establish it's human, there's nothing wrong with it. But the sooner we can recognize it, we can actually do something about it.
Yes, I mean, I think the other thing that one of the emotions you didn't mention about being below the line is self-judgment and judgment for others and self-criticism. So, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, well, what's wrong with me? I'm definitely in a victim mindset, or I'm below the line. Why can't I do this? Why can't I get above the line? You know what? Just notice that you're doing that, and notice that you are being self-critical, and try to park that, and just, recognize that there's a part of your mind that has been unconsciously self-critical or self-judgmental for a long time, and just notice that and build some awareness of that, because don't judge yourself harshly. That would be one message I would have people take away from this conversation.
Yeah, self-compassion is super, super important. I've written quite a bit about self-compassion as well. And I think for me, I mean, I I go below the line. And luckily, I've got tools now because I'm working with this professionally that helps me recognize it. Um, but that doesn't mean that I don't go below the line. I'm going, well, I get reactive, or I get anxious about something. And then I have to take a step back and look at it. And I think an example that many, many people, if not all of us, can recognize was during the pandemic. So I definitely went up and down during that period. I had actually, in the beginning of the pandemic, I was firmly above the line. I loved that. Actually, I really enjoyed that my traveling got cancelled. I had up until that point, I felt I was traveling way too much for work. It was nice to be in demand, but I had difficulty saying no. And so I felt when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh my God, did I manifest this? I mean, look at it. The sun was shining in London for 3 months straight, and I had the opportunity to go inwards and do some inner work. But then, there were these dips below the line, concerns about my health and concerns about this virus that we didn't know how contagious was it. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty, and we know the story. Of course, we know that many people felt isolated, lonely, anxious, and we know that it created some mental health issues for a lot of people. And in that situation, that's when we really need the tools that we're going to talk about here, because we need the tools that can help us self-regulate, right? Realize where we recognize that we are below the line, self-regulate, and especially manage our nervous system, because that's really what's at play here. So so let's now talk about and begin to focus on how we can get above the line. I mean, we've talked at length about why we want to be there. And we've also mentioned that some of the first steps is really that self-awareness, recognizing where we are and having self-compassion. There's no need beating ourselves up, because then we actually pushing ourselves further down if we just criticize ourselves and make us wrong. So, how would you frame some of these benefits of self-awareness, and do you have a specific tool you can share with us on this topic?
Yeah, so I think the self-awareness, let's talk about that for a moment, because that's the foundation for all of this. Um, Many of us go through our day in a very unconscious state. We get up, we get our coffee, we get dressed, we run out the door, we get to work, or we come to our desk and we sit down at our work, and we sort of immediately assume the costume and of all the things that we were doing yesterday, and we hit the ground running and we stay busy and we're in back-to-back meetings. And many of us are going through our day unconsciously, and many of us have these patterns that we've been executing for months, weeks, years, decades even, around how we're behaving unconsciously. And it's like being, maybe like, imagine being in a room with a fridge that's sort of humming in the background, and then the fridge stops humming and suddenly there's quiet, right? So there's a humming that's going on through this sort of unconscious stress on unconscious behavioral and thinking patterns that are just there, always continually running in our brain and in our mind, and chattering and chattering and chattering. And sometimes the dial gets turned up, and you know, it sort of goes into crazyville, where you're feeling like, oh my God, this is so stressful. But in many cases, you know, we're way down here and there's this low hum that just exists and we're unconscious of it. You can't change what you're not conscious of. So step one is becoming aware of how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're acting, how you're behaving every day. So what are those things that are coming up? Can you start to build self-awareness around them? Can you start to watch how you're thinking? Can you start to just be the monitor? Can you start to observe a little bit about how you're feeling, how you're acting? What are the types of things that throw you for a loop? What are the types of things that cause you to react? When do you get angry? When are you like completely spacing out? Like, I ask some of my students in these classes, well, did anybody ever drive to work and then suddenly you're at work, but you don't remember actually getting there, right? So you went unconscious for that entire drive. I mean, how scary is that, number one? But we all do it. I did it yesterday when I was driving home from Pilates class. I was like, oh, look, Annmarie, you're here already. You've been completely just in your mind chattering about something all the way, as opposed to being fully present. So we need to give ourselves the gift of awareness around how we're thinking, how we're acting, how we're feeling right now. And to do that, it involves carving out some time for ourselves, maybe carving out time at the start of the day to set an intention. How do I want to think today? How do I want to feel today? What do I want to notice today? And then through the day, maybe just a reminder to say, well, what's coming up for me today? What am I becoming aware of? What am I noticing as I'm executing through my day and working through my day? And then the end of the day, before you shut off your computer for the day and sort of go home, whether you're working from home or not, just take a mental 5 minutes to jot down, what am I becoming aware of today? What did I notice? When did I go unconscious? Was there anything good that happened? I love to talk about glimmers. It's pretty easy to talk about triggers, right? What are those things that trigger us and trigger a reaction in us, and when we're feeling bad? But I want people to also start noticing when they're feeling good. Like, was there anything in your day that was a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of joy? Maybe it was like, hey, I drove and I noticed the sun rising, or somebody waved to me and let me in while I was driving my car to work, or somebody brought me an apple, or it could be anything, right? It could be something super small. It could just be something that you've noticed, and you notice a butterfly, you notice a bird, whatever it is. Just start small and start writing down what those glimmers are as well, because you can train your brain to start looking for the good stuff, not just focusing on the bad stuff, right? And I don't really even like to use the words good and bad, because all of these emotions, all of these things we're experiencing are exactly what we need to be experiencing for our personal growth and development. But you want to just notice what's happening to you that feels good, what's happening to you that doesn't feel good, and start to write those down. And so the tool really is about building that time into your calendar, and start that journal. Take a notebook, and you could even put a line down in the middle and say, you know, when did I go unconscious, and what glimmers did I notice? And just start writing those down day to day, and start building more awareness day to day of how you're thinking, how you're acting, and how you're feeling. And then you'll be able to create the space. When you start to notice it, you'll be able to inject a little bit of space into those reactions to give yourself time to respond. And that's what's really important, but it needs to start with self-awareness.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. I agree. Self-awareness is the bedrock. And so what we're essentially encouraging everybody to do is to set an intention, right? Have a specific time, perhaps during the day, where they begin to reflect on themselves. I often find with the people I coach, if I just say to them, practice self-awareness, Well, it doesn't really come automatically. We've got to set, as you said, maybe it's the last 5 minutes of the day. We've got to set a specific time, because if it doesn't come naturally, we've got to kind of invite it in explicitly. So what we're saying to people here is set a specific time to make it simple, reflect on your day as you've described, and perhaps also add this simple question: am I above the line or below the line? How often did I drop below the line today? There's no judgment. It is what it is. We're practicing the awareness. And at any moment during the day, if you remember, ask yourself, am I above the line or below the line? If you're below the line, it's not wrong, but notice that you have a choice. And so with that, I think we will begin to wrap up and let everybody know that we will have many more episodes where we home in on um, specific tools and small nuggets that can help us to practice what we've just discussed here, practice becoming aware and getting above the line. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up, Annmarie?
No, I want to add one more question that they should add. I love the are you above and below the line? That's the simplicity of it. But also ask yourself, what did you learn today? When you do that retrospective, what did you learn today? Maybe you learned something about yourself. Maybe you learned something about some other people. Maybe you noticed something. What did you learn today? Because it's not always about winning. It's not always about growing. Everything's there to help us learn and grow. So start noticing what you learned.
Wonderful. That was a really good reminder there at the end. And with that, I'm going to thank everybody for listening or watching if you're looking at us. And we look forward to, of course, hearing how this goes for you, because we are here to add value to you and we thrive on feedback. So please come back after you've tried some of this out and leave a little comment in the section below this video. And remember that these tools or this particular check-in tool, it goes for anything you experience during the day, be it at work or at home, because we are one person showing up, whether we're at work or at home. We can drop the line, whether we're at work or at home. So use it in every part of your life. And I also want to remind you that it's only when we take action that we can actually make a real change. So please go and take action. And with that, once again, thank you for watching, everybody.
Thank you. Bye for now.